Live.
Well, hello and welcome to the Waking Up Spiritually podcast. We're so delighted to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I'm Wendy Rose Williams, and I am a past life energy healer, and I have the pleasure and the gifts to help people release energy that does not serve them anymore, whether it's chronic pain, emotional and physical, as well as anxiety, depression, or just feeling stuck. And my website is wendyrosewilliams.com. We have a special guest today, but first I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful co-host, Greg Kirk, who's going to introduce himself, and then we will have a marvelous guest, as I said, and surprise for you today.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Kirk. I'm an energy worker, energy healer. I also do in-person sessions as well as remote sessions in the Connecticut area. Yesterday, we just had a fire circle in Woodbury, Connecticut, and my hair still smells like wood smoke. We do these online group healing circles every Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. East Coast time. And the whole point of what I do is to try to remove blocks to your healing or your spiritual progression. I can be found at gregkirk.com, and that's spelled GREGGKIRK.com. Well, without further ado, let's get started with today's guest, and I'm going to share our deck here.
And while Greg is bringing that up, let me explain to you. You may be listening to this podcast live in our Facebook group, and we so love having you join us there. On Facebook, you can find us as Waking Up Spiritually. You can also go to our website where you'll find an archive of all the episodes at wakingupspiritually.com. And there is a search button on there. So you can just pop in a word or two of what you most need help with, because that is what Greg and I are here for, is to help support that journey to waking up spiritually, as is our wonderful speaker today.
Yes, and we would like to welcome with us today a very special guest, Kimberly Clark Sharp. Kimberly is the founder of the Seattle International Association of Near-Death Studies. It's the world's oldest support group for near-death experiencers, and it's been going since 1982. She was named one of the 40 most influential people under the age of 40 in the Pacific Northwest in 1987. She's also the founder of the Department of Social Work at the world's first bone marrow transplant center at the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. She's a pioneer in the field of critical care social work at Harborview Medical Center. She's an international conference and workshop speaker. She's published many journals, textbooks, and magazines. She's the consultant to the news and entertainment industries, most recently Netflix Surviving Death Episode 1 on near-death experiences. And she's a near-death experiencer herself. She's a cancer survivor, and she's the co-instructor of Terminal Illness Seminar, School of Medicine, University of Washington, for 20 years from 1977 to 1997. She's a clinical associate professor of the School of Social Work, University of Washington, and she's a clinical licensed social worker, and she got that degree from the University of Washington in 1976. But most of all, she's the author of After the Light, which was published in 1995. So without further ado, Kimberly, we would like to welcome you to our podcast today.
Thank you. That's a lot of words.
Yes.
I should add to one thing. I'm retired, not from Seattle International Association for Near-Death Studies. Acronym time, IANDS, IANDS. But all of my academic stuff, I am retired.
Okay.
But I get to keep all of the, fancy initials after my name, which is nice.
They were hard-earned.
Yes.
Yeah, adds credibility, I have to say. I mean, I'm not mad at that.
Right. Well, tell us about your story. What started all this?
Well, I'm from Kansas, a grounded state. And in 1970, I was with my dad at the Shawnee Mission, Kansas, DMV, I'm going to add something here because it just occurred to me. There are two things about my near-death experience that are unusual. One is that I had a witness, my father. I mean, can I get a witness? I mean, fantastic. And he was a lawyer, so he was paying attention to details. So I have information that from him that I would not have had if I was not with my dad or any witness that I knew. The other thing that is rare is that I did not have a life review. I had a life preview. So we'll get to both, but I think I'll go with my dad's perspective first, because that does lay the groundwork, and that happens to be where my body was, on the ground. We were leaving the DMV. I had not done well. Couldn't parallel park. That becomes relevant. Anyway, I don't remember that day other than not feeling great, waiting literally for my number to come up. I mean, what a sense of humor the universe has, because my number did come up. But we were leaving that building, and I, again, don't remember this, but I just lost consciousness. My dad tried to catch me. That didn't work. So now I'm outside of the building where at least I can be seen by others, because I fell out the door. And one of those others was a uniformed nurse who scurried over and determined that I didn't have a pulse and I wasn't breathing. So this is just before 911 became institutionalized. And I might add, I live in Seattle now, which is the birthplace of 911. And my dear husband, Don Sharp, supervised that program for 17 years. But that's way ahead in the future. So we're back in Kansas, and I'm just a very uninformed, cuddled firstborn kid who couldn't parallel park my car. So instead of 911, 2 phone calls were made, one to the closest hospital, which was in Kansas City, Missouri, and the other to the fire department of Shawnee Mission. These were volunteer firefighters, but capable people. They got there first. They had, according to my father, opened new packaging of a portable ventilator. They applied the seal to my mouth, turned it on, but this new ventilator had 2 features. One, of course, to ventilate, which is what you want. The other, though, was a vacuum mode in case people had something caught in their throat.
Someone had aspirated.
When that happens and people get to a point where their heart stops beating, it's called a cafe coronary. So that does happen. And that's also why we tell our kids, don't run with candy in your mouth, you know. So anyway, this feature would clear the airway, then they'd flick a switch, pump the air in. Sadly for my body, it was on vacuum mode. It was just a default thing. No one's default, but it literally vacuumed the air out of me, sucked the life out of me, one might say. They knew immediately what had happened, flipped a switch, again, according to my dad, air went into my body, but parts of my lungs had come in contact with themselves. And that's kind of a sticky wicket, literally, to get them separated. A blast of high pressure air from a portable ventilator would not do the trick, because it has to be done slowly and ICU, preferably. So all this air got into my body, but it couldn't fill my lungs. So it just expanded me. And apparently I blew up like a bad balloon. That's called epithelial emphysema, by the way. And that's probably my quote unquote cause of death, suffocation. Anyway, my poor father, the poor bystanders, and the poor volunteer firefighters knew this, you know, I wasn't coming back. So they began to talk to my dad about, I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do. But then this fellow came from the back of what now was a sizable crowd, because this is sidewalk theater. And he just, according to my dad, pushed everyone aside, swearing like a mule Skinner. And we have our Missouri jokes about that, but I'll not, you know, go into that now. But people in Kansas don't swear. So he did what we call mouth to mouth, and then that didn't work. So he turned to my dad and said, I'm not getting a blankety blank thing. My dad's memory ends there. until the ambulance arrived, body already in the back of the ambulance, great cheer in the crowd because I was breathing on my own, still unconscious. My dad jumped into the ambulance and off we went to the hospital. In the ER, things went goofy again, I guess. Again, I have no memory. So why don't I just get to the point and tell you what I remember, because it was amazing. So first I heard a woman's voice to my left. This is where my dad could really validate, because that nurse was on my left. And I could hear a woman excitedly say, "I'm not getting a pulse. I'm not getting a pulse." And I turned to her, and with the same sense of reality with which I'm now speaking to two of you, I said, "Of course you're getting a pulse. Otherwise, I wouldn't be speaking." You know, I didn't want to disparage the poor woman, but come on. She ignored me. Everyone ignored me. But I mention this because when we're with loved ones who seem to be dead or dying, still talk. I could hear perfectly well. I just couldn't talk so great without this part of my body working. So I just left that scene like, I'm out of here. Found myself next in another place. I knew it was good, but I was surrounded by comfortable gray fog. And I just felt like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. It was very calm. I have said before, it was like being at the gate, you know, at an airport. You got your boarding pass, you're just waiting for your seat to be called so you can get on the plane. It was like, yeah, I can chill here, it's fine. I knew I wasn't alone, but I couldn't see who else. Then the part that remains after all these years, very hard to talk about, because talk about no words. The thing is, a near-death experience, they're called ineffable because there are no words. And also within a near-death experience, there's no time. So I'm entering that realm right now. So everything from this point on is a metaphor. But this light exploded under me. It was like if the earth had detonated. It was that kind of power, but not violent, just powerful. And this light, which was brighter than a million suns. I've never stared at a single sun. So a million suns, where am I getting this? But it was impossibly bright, and it spread out in all directions. And I might add, I could see why. I didn't have eyeballs, but I could see just fine. And I could turn and look, and not only was the light going in all directions like forever, but it was endlessly layering on itself. And I somehow knew that I was beholding time, sort of, you know, that it was beholding eternity is what I was doing, but also endless dimensions. Now we live in a three-dimensional world, but there's like so much more going on that we're not aware of in our normal state, called, you know, being alive on earth and flesh. So that was just amazing. But this light was made of nothing but love. And it was, again, that power. And it was like all directed at me. It felt so personal. And I said, "Homie, home." I later learned from my parents, again, I mentioned I was firstborn, that homie home is what I used to say when, you know, we were in the car going back to the neighborhood, and I'd see landmarks and go, "Homie home, homie home." Again, it was a Gucci goo moment for my parents. I don't remember. That was probably 2 years old. But that's what I said. I was homie home. I got to communicate with this light. It was in the form of math and music. Would skeptics say, "Oh, near-death experiencers get what they expect"? I mean, in church, I'm asked to lip sync. It is that bad. I cannot. I have no music. I don't do anything. I don't even play the spoons. Nothing. And I can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Yet the communication was so perfect. And I have since learned that until about age 10, the brain doesn't know the difference really between math and music. So I'm just gonna, you know, if anyone wants to explore that, I'd love to hear from you. But just a point of interest, I didn't have a brain though. I was not in my body. Then I heard the worst thing possible, and that's that I had to go back. And it was like, no, are you kidding me? Yes, no, I'm here to tell you, I'm going to argue with God. God's going to win, being argued. And when I say God, I don't mean that in any religious sense at all. It's 3 letters that don't even begin to describe, talk about ineffable. This, I'm comfortable saying my creator. But it's said with reverence, it could be, Fred. I mean, there are no words for this, that creator, I guess. Anyway, the creator created a real mess for me by sending me back, because by golly, I missed my body by about the same distance as I missed the curb trying to parallel park. And here I'd had this incredible spiritual experience. And all I could think of was a joke. I looked at my physical body and went, I can't even park myself. So it might have something to do with why I don't parallel park to this day. I'll drive a mile to avoid it. So there I was, in spiritually though, in the same position, it felt like, as my physical body, but I did not relate to that body. The me that was me was not in that body. That was a conveyance to get around on earth, but all of my consciousness, all of my awareness was not in there. And then I saw a man bend over and put his mouth against that body's mouth. That turned out to be what my dad calls the Good Samaritan, the swearing man who came out from the crowd. And as soon as his mouth touched my physical mouth, I went back into my body, but through him. So yeah, and I knew everything about the guy, at least emotionally, how scared he really was, how he felt like a bit of an idiot that he had stepped for, all of that. But mainly, here I had just been with the greatest love of all. And there was someone loving me. He loved me. It was in a form of compassion. And that's a very strong version of love.
Wow.
So of course it drew me back like a lighthouse. So I then slid into my body, and it was miserable because I was still fully aware, but I didn't quite hit my marks. So I felt like I was running around this dark, clammy, awful thing. I like it now, but at the time I didn't. And so I begged God to take me back to homey home. And God knows I can whine, and I'm a good whiner. If you want me to whine for anybody in prayer, I'm your gal. So I whined, take me back, please. I don't want to be here, please, please. So I was back, and there was, the math and music communication again. And I was directed to turn to the right. At least it felt like that in my state. And there's like this window or portal thing, and beyond it was my heaven. And I knew it, and I wanted to be there. Interestingly, it was beautiful, but it was mainly grass. I mean, my heaven's a grass heaven. And it'd be a lovely scene. It looked like Kentucky. Skeptics, I've never been to the state of Kentucky, but apparently that's my heaven. Anyway, but it's that every blade of grass by the countless had awareness, had consciousness. I could sense it and communicate with it in a way I can't explain. But the grass wasn't green, to quote myself, it was green. And the sky wasn't blue, it was blue. I mean, everything was beyond earthly vivid and wonderful. And then I was told if I went through that window, though, no coming back, that was my border. So it's like, okay, bye. And off I went. And I wasn't all the way through when my creator, there's a flash of light, like in my vision comes yonder. And in it was a place where mountains met water. That's all I knew. And that if I chose to live, that's where I would be living. Well, it wasn't Kansas, and that's where everything I knew was. So, nope, I'm going to go to my heaven. There was another flash of light. And this time it was like a portrait gallery of people that I didn't know, but that there were labels under each big portrait, but they were very mundane, like next door neighbor, best friend was the first one. On it went. Well, I didn't know those people. I just told if I chose to live, that those would be significant relationships. Nah. So I'm going to go back to heaven. And then again, I was almost all the way through. There was a third flash of light, And it was me being of service. That something hadn't occurred to me before. That was actually being of service. So I said, cool. Well, turns out God's a hippie. I said cool as an adjective, but God thought it was a decision of yes. Yeah, man. If I say it was 1970, I was back. And I was back. Good and strong back. So I pulled my medical records when I wrote After the Light, and I couldn't believe it. My admit sheet said physically simple fate ? Cardiac ? Patient brought in though because of snafu with a ventilator. And I thought, I'm a snafu, of course. My lot in life, I'll be the snafu. So death by snafu, that's me. So I was back and things were very different. Talk about no words. All of the words I've shared have been developed over 53 years and counting. But life was very different. I began to be aware of things pushing me. I say things because I don't know what, but compelling me to move forward. Finally did get a license, got a car. I had a hamster named Toto. He was in a bird cage in the front seat of my Volkswagen. And off we left from Kansas. And when they want to add though, because it was my first like synchronistic thing that happened. I hated change, by the way. I hated change so much. I actually planned to marry a little boy I met in the 7th grade because his name was Bob Clark and my name was Kim Clark. I wouldn't even have to change the monograms on the towels. I was going to be Kim Clark forever. Being in a car headed to the toll booth of I-70, which is the east-west vein in the Midwest, used to have to pay to get on the highway. And I changed my mind about everything. I thought, no, I take it back. And I hate change. And I kept, remember, just whining, talk about whining. Now I'm into what Oprah Winfrey calls the ugly cry. It involves mucus and teeth showing that don't look great. And I just said, I hate change. I don't want to change. I don't want to change. And we were approaching the toll booth and there's this big sign that said, change needed.
The literal billboard.
The literal billboard. Oh, and then there's one more little funny thing. Ha, ha, ha. I was crying a lot. So I was like, okay, I get it. All right, I'll go. I need some Kleenex. Oh, my name is Kimberly Clark. I'm sure my mom put a box of Kleenex between the seats, but it was a white box with black letters that said Kimberly Clark. And I went, oh, thank you. And off I went. So that's what happened that launched me into the wonderful world of social work and death and dying and near-death experiences and their ilk.
So when you got started, I mean, what was the work that your service that you said, what did you start doing first?
Listening, because it turns out I've never applied for a job ever. I didn't even apply for graduate school. I've always been asked to apply, again, to quote myself, but my life has been like standing on the automatic door opener of a grocery store, just the doors open.
Wow.
The work within those doors is heavy duty, so really a lot of heavy lifting, at least emotionally, because after graduate school of social work, as we heard, University of Washington, I had a great education and then got a job at a place called Harborview Medical Center, where I did an internship there, and then I got hired to be the social worker for coronary care and intensive care units. And Harborview to this day serves a landmass of 1/4 of the United States. It's a huge trauma center. Wow. So people were dying throughout the day, and I was loving it because I wasn't afraid of death. That was a byproduct of my near-death experience, in addition to perceiving things that weren't there. Oh, can I interrupt myself and tell a story?
Of course.
I could keep viewers here all day with my stories, but this has popped into my mind recently, and so I'm going to share it. I'm at work in the intensive care unit at Harborview. There were curtains around the beds, and then a big, that way the nurse's station could see everything. And a woman died, had a 16-year-old son in the waiting room and no other next of kin. And the doctor and I had to go in and tell this kid his mom had died. One of the sadder parts of my job is doing that. Anyone's job is letting a loved one know that death has occurred. So, but I did say, do you want to see her? And he said, no, but I'd like to talk to her. I said, done. So I went in, and just in case he changed his mind, the nurses, got her all primped, but pulled the curtain around, and we walked up to where her head would be on the other side of the curtain. And I said, here's where your mom is, and this is your shot. Tell her whatever you want, because I know she can hear you. And then I walked away. Well, I cheated. I knew that she could hear him because I could see her standing next to him, to his right, with her arm around him, comforting him as he said, I love you, Mom. I love you. I love you. I love you. She was with him. That has never left my memory fully, because I think that happens when we die, whether someone's perceiving it or not, that we are still with our loved ones. It's just that they're not there physically. And that is a reason to grieve. I'm not going to dimension grief. Grief is horrible, but we aren't alone. And that's just loved ones. And then there's invisibilities that I've been able to perceive that surround us all the time. Sometimes not to our best good, by the way. Sometimes, we get tripped so that we learn how to get up. And I believe that we're born, we choose to come to earth. That's one of the questions I asked God, though, was, why are we here? Basically, it was you banged on the door to get in. So stop your complaining. So, but we're not here alone. As hard as life can be, we are loved, every last person, even the unlovable, and there's plenty of those on earth. But the best we can be is only the best we can be. We'll never probably be able to fully unconditionally love everyone on the planet. But there are some who have done a really good job of trying to get there, Dalai Lama and many others. But I'm not one of those people. I'm the social worker in the crowd, just trying to help people move on with their lives in peace and happiness.
What's your most memorable story during your time as a social worker?
Okay, well, the most famous story, thank you for asking, Greg, involves a shoe on a ledge at Harborview. As a matter of fact, this is a really famous story. And here's the horse's mouth. It's been altered. Yeah. Oh, it's a red shoe. It's a black shoe. It was a doctor that found it. It was a rough. No. It was me, the social worker. So on the coronary care unit, as opposed to the beds on the ICU at Harborview, where there's curtains, in coronary care, the rooms were very large and still are very large and have doors, and it's a whole different scene. And admitted to coronary care one night was a woman named Maria. She'd never been to Seattle. She lived in the Yakima Valley area and had a massive heart attack, was unconscious, admitted to Harborview through the ER, and put immediately on the coronary care unit. I met her the next day. My Spanish was limited to high school, and she had a little bit of English, but it was mainly, time to call the translator, but, someone to help her and help me do the workup and all that. So it was fine. Nice woman, I might add. I had other patients, but 3 days later, as I recall, I was in the chart room where I could also see the monitors, cardiac monitors, and somebody was flatlining. That happened every day, all day, still does at Harborview. So, I looked up to see who was in trouble, and it was Maria. Harborview is a University of Washington teaching hospital. If anybody listening has been in a teaching hospital, you get the thundering herds. There isn't a doctor and a nurse and a respiratory therapist. There's students and interns and residents and visitors and attendings. So there were about 12 people in her room. easy resuscitation. I left while they continued the cleanup. Maria was unconscious still, but breathing on her own. And then hours later, I got paged to the coronary care unit because Maria was agitated. Her nurse couldn't find the interpreter, and so called the social worker. So I went in, and so I'm going to really condense a longer story. Bottom line is Maria was able to tell me, because we never did find anyone to translate. So here we are in our pidgin English and Spanish, Spanglish. But she said first she found herself at the ceiling level of the room looking down, and she told me, pretty much what was going on. And I didn't believe her because she was talking to the best and worst person possible. As a matter of fact, the best because I had had an out-of-body experience. I knew what she was talking about. But the worst person was that other part of me that had decided as a social worker I was schizophrenic, and I had decided that. I thought, okay, because I was seeing things, that other people couldn't, and I thought I'm just a highly functioning schizophrenic.
Wow.
And that was going to change that day, because Maria then said she was outside of her room, could see the emergency room entrance and all that. And I thought, okay, but your room's right above the emergency room entrance, so probably she could see out the window, which she couldn't. This is all on me now. I'm making things up to discount her because I hadn't dealt with my own experience. I hadn't talked to anyone who'd had that kind of experience, and she wasn't striking me as schizophrenic. I'd done her workup, and she was sane. But then she said she saw a shoe on a ledge, and what is a shoe doing outside, under a window? And she was agitated because she wanted somebody to get the shoe. She wasn't agitated like bum. She was agitated aesthetically because, oh my gosh, all these things happen. So I had to go get the shoe. And again, to cut this afternoon short, I finally found it after failing trying to walk around the building and seeing it. And then I started out wrong floor, wrong side of the building, but eventually looked down center of the building facing west, and there was a shoe on the ledge, but it was exactly as she said. She said it was like a man's shoe, a large shoe. It was blue. There's a little scuffed up place by the little toe and a white lace that went under the heel. Should I get it confused with all the other shoes out on a ledge? It's just such specific detail. And I looked down and saw the bloody shoe. I just like, I couldn't support my own body weight. My forehead thunked against the glass. And for just a moment, I said out loud, this happened to me. And my breath, I was that clumped against the glass. So my breath made a foggy thing. It's like everything changed. It was just like this big shift. So I reached for the shoe. That was a meanie, I will admit. I can go there. So I walked into a room with the shoe behind my back and said, well, what did the inside of the shoe look like? She said, I don't know. I was on the outside. So I went, okay. And I pulled up the shoe. It was like, Viva Zapata. And that shoe, by the way, this is going to be really hard for listeners and viewers to believe, but back then, people actually stayed in the hospital until they were well enough to go home. A concept not available to us today, but Maria wasn't a fly-by-night kind of inpatient. She was there for 3 weeks. The shoe sat proudly, became the Shroud of Turin of Harborview. And then I followed her for 3 years, an outpatient. So this was a significant relationship. She gave me the shoe when she discharged, and I've said for decades it's in our garage. And if anyone wants to clean our garage, just find the shoe while you're at it.
All right.
So I did lose Maria eventually. I actually took a leave of absence, backpacking on Europe, came back and didn't see Maria again. We don't know what happened to her. So that's a big, important case.
Okay. So
Not the only one, though. I've had plenty of people who have seen things remotely, but this is the shoe on the ledge is the biggie.
right. But what I find interesting is up to that point, you thought you were schizophrenic.
oh, here's what kind of sealed that deal too. To get to my office, I went from a parking garage through the ER and then out into the main part of the hospital. We're on the same floor. So, I was hoofing up through the ER and came to a stop because there was a woman that looked a lot like me, frankly, same age, appearance, on a gurney and 2-point restraints, which is the hands. And she looked so miserable. So I just said something to the resident about, what's up with her? And he barely looked up, said, oh, she thinks she's been going in and out of her body. So we're sending her up to 5 Center. 5 Center was the hardcore lockup psych ward. I thought, ooh, I'm never telling anyone. I must be crazy. So that's how I tried to define it. However, after the shoe, because I was in academics, I needed a gig. I mean, I was ambitious. I wanted to get promoted through the ranks. That meant research and publications in peer-reviewed journals. And I love that stuff. So that was fine with me, but I was going to explore what the heck happened to Maria and me. So I began to ask every patient that flatlined. So this was in April when I met Maria. So until June of that year, I was getting nothing. I'd say, what happened when you died? What do you remember? It's like, nothing. Until June. And there was a 16-year-old admitted. She was an overdose. Normally 16-year-olds would go to Seattle's Children's Hospital, but Harborview was closer and she was in dire straits, ongoing resuscitation. So I went in after she was conscious to do a big workup because this was a suicide attempt. And I said, but what do you remember about being dead? And I use those words. It's pretty like pie in the face, but that's how I felt about it. And anyway, she said, oh, I was with Oompa. I went, wait, Erk? So where it had taken forever for Maria to describe, again, language in her defense was a problem, but it just all these things happen. Here's this kid going, she might as well have been chewing gum. Yeah, I saw Oompa. What's an Oompa? Going through my language book again, but turned out she called her grandfather Oompa. He died when she was too young to learn how to say grandpa. So it's Oompa. And that's how, in a suicide attempt, she found herself in his arms. And he was in a seated position, holding her, loving her, but also giving her what for, saying, you got to go back. This is not the way you're going to do things. So he was grandfatherly, strict, but loving. And so she went, okay, and came back. And I might add, for a heck of a long time, again, these people never left my lives. Any stories I have are people I really didn't know. And I don't ever take other people's stories. Every story I share is
It's firsthand.
It very firsthand, and for a lengthy time. Anyway, she wound up, well, she had to have mental health, interventions and all that. So she was inpatient for a while. Then she was outpatient side, but that building was right across the street. So I could see her a lot. Got close to her mom, single mom, and went over the professional line with this 16-year-old, but I don't care. So we began to, because she wanted to share with other teenagers, like, don't hurt yourself. So we wound up going to assemblies in area schools where she could herself talk about it. It wasn't a grown-up, guidance counselor or doctor or psychiatrist saying, don't hurt yourself. It was someone who had. And she said, this was over a boy. That was dumb. She was very effective. And then she aged out of that. But, she married, had a little girl, and that's when I last saw her. But it was a long time. So, and then then there were 3 of us. So I was good for go. I was going to start asking questions. And I did. And did well with it because eventually I figured out there's so many people and they're all messed up. Everyone thinks it's crazy. So we need a support group. And Seattle Ions, we stuck a flag in, called ourselves Seattle Ions because Ions itself, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, such a long title. I didn't make it up. IANS was already a research organization founded by researchers then at the University of Connecticut. And but there wasn't anyone helping the near-death experiencers. They were just being studied by scientists / physicians. So started a group, and there were 4 of us sitting on a couch. All of us were near-death experiencers, and that was the beginning. And someone has said, again, 1982, and we're in 2023 now, so it's been a while. But someone has figured out, because we have sign-in sheets, that 10,000 people have gone through the doors of what we call Seattle IANS.
Wow.
Oh my
They may
goodness.
be repeats. I did not do that count. I just know what I'm told. But think about it.
Wow.
Over
That's
40
profound. Mhm.
41 years, you know, a lot of people come and go. Plus, I meet other near-death experiencers when I give talks, and I'm likely to hear from someone listening to this program. And so I'm still swimming in the deep end of life, and the deep end is when we get towards the end of it, and then we swim to our
Oh,
heaven.
your homie home.
So Kimberly, I've got some questions about what you shared so well about the near-death experience itself. So you mentioned seeing those big portraits with the labels on them of next door neighbor and best friend. So how did they compare? Like when you actually met those people, did you go back to that moment and think, oh my gosh, I know it's you because I already saw your portrait? How did that all happen?
You know, I just gave a speech in Washington, D.C. last month on pretty much this subject. You know, how not to be an idiot after a near-death experience in social situations. But I'm an idiot after a near-death experience in social situations. Yeah, so the first person, if I knew we were talking about this, I could have her right here. Her name's Peggy. But the first portrait was something that said best friend. And then on it went. Well, years went by, and I was on a date with a fellow who sold sailboats, and he just sold a sailboat to somebody who was also his friend. But we had to go by and see her. And we were about to get on board, and I looked down, and there she is. That's the woman I saw as best friend. Now, last month, Peggy herself was holding forth in our living room. We have a daughter who got married, and so part of the reception was here at the house. And she was sharing her perspective of what it was like to meet me. And her perspective wasn't very flattering towards yours truly, because she said, she looked at me and went, "You're my best friend." She said, yes, it was. My perspective is similar, though. I couldn't believe it. I mean, this was like, what the heck? So I'm already in where mountains met water, which is Seattle, by the way. And getting back to Toto, I'm from Kansas. I had Toto. We had not a big tornado, but enough of a tornado outside of Hayes that I took shelter, and stayed with a friend from college who actually jumped in the car and left with me the next day, and made our way up, in time to Seattle, Washington, which then, as now, also is called the Emerald City. So I really am worthy. I have red shoes to
You
prove
have
it.
all the proof.
I have it there. Toto, Kansas, Seattle, Emerald City. I mean, anyway, I digress. So I'm looking at Peggy in shock, and then I went, "You're my best friend." So I'm going to move back from the camera. I hope you can still hear me. So you see my body language, but I was like, "But you're my best friend. But you're my best friend. You're my best friend." Again, socially annoying. But she was, and she will tell you herself, I just wore her down. So yeah, so
You'd seen the portrait.
and then the next door neighbor, that was Alice Jones, and I mean, on it went. Again, there are people, nothing, there wasn't a famous movie star in there or anything. United States, or it was a life, but again, a life of service that has continued to this broadcast. Actually, part of being of service is to help people.
Yes.
And Kimberly, how did you know where to go? There's many beautiful places where the mountains meet the water, but how did you go directly to Seattle, or did like life happen along the way, or how did that come together? Because that was
That's
such a
great,
part
yeah.
of your
I
story.
I know, that crazy creator never gave me a map. So I headed west, but in that no change situation, I headed west because that's where mountains were. And, the big mountains. So, but it's true. Every stop the way I thought, oh, this must be it. The first stop was Denver, but no water. And then eventually over the mountains, and then Salt Lake City eventually came up. I had a great aunt who lived there. And I thought, oh, this must be it, because that is where mountains meet water. And she had the world's softest lap. And I was still very upset about my experience. And everything was crazy. And she pulled me onto her lap like a child and said, honey, you've had yourself a spiritual experience. And I thought, oh, I have words. So that was great. But she said, no, but it's not for here. And then, but how did I know? Basically, it was people moving me along the way. Next was Lake Tahoe. I really thought that would be it. But no, it wasn't. Again, something moving me along. And then it was San Francisco. And then I thought, okay, this is it. We're missing the mountains, but hey, peace, love, baby. The hippie community was perfect for me. Perfect. Because it was all about peace and love. And I actually stayed for a while and had a place on Haight Street. Haight-Ashbury was the center of the universe for hippies at that time. But the marvel of it was, I'm so filled with love, and I still live on a street called Haight. It was just, but then things pushed me. And again, there was something in the car with us that had a tremendous presence. It was just invisible, but who even took the wheel of the car once. And to flash forward to when I wrote After the Light, I hired a detective to find people that I wanted to write about. So I got their side of the story correct. And the gal that jumped in my car in Hays, Kansas, Mary Sue Bolig, I finally reached her, found her in the Big Island of Hawaii. And I was telling her, I'm about to write this book, this thing, we're going to talk about a presence in the car that, was goading us on. I'm just going, okay, here we go crazy again. And she heard me out. And then she said, that guide belonged to me. That was my guide, not yours. She was perfectly aware. I went in shock, but she thought I would think she was crazy. But she said, yeah. And then we got to Seattle. She left Seattle, took that presence with her. It was just that I was able to perceive it, but it was her guide.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if I answered your question or not, Wendy.
You did, because I didn't know if it had been like a straight line.
No. It was a road trip.
And
But
what
I knew when I got to Seattle, it was where I was supposed to be. And another joke, God loves a good sign, at least in my life. So pulling in, to greater Seattle, there's a big billboard because Boeing had gone belly up at that time. And there's a big billboard that said, well, the last person leaving Seattle, turn out the lights. And here I am driving in going, I'm good. I'm a hamster, I'll find a job. I'm all right. I'm here to be of service.
did you have a
Yes.
feeling of being home
Yes,
when you reached Seattle?
absolutely. Bam. Something I hadn't felt in any other location. It was like this.
Absolutely. I
Things began
did
to
too.
happen.
I
Yeah.
did too. I felt it in multiple places because I've lived multiple places, but again, just being willing to listen to that guidance, it's just pretty amazing.
And
And
again, we're not alone. Whether you can actually hear the guidance, anyone listening I'm talking to, whether you can hear or perceive it all is small matter. Yeah, it's kind of cool if you can, but again, I can't emphasize enough that we're not alone and that we're so well loved.
exactly, because when you can hear that guidance, it's just uplifting, it's comforting. It doesn't mean you're always going to hear what you want to hear, because there can be that ego interference of what we want versus what we need. But that is the difference to me between hearing loving divine messages, spirit guides, our own higher selves versus mental illness. That to me is the difference.
And
So,
there is a difference. It's measurable. Fortunately, now in the Bible for all psychiatrists, called the DSM-5, I think we're up to now. I look at my bookshelf.
mhm,
This is now a thing. Near-death experiences or spiritual transformative experiences are now not considered schizophrenia. There's a difference between being what we call crazy and being hyper spiritual. One of them is, you got to know your zip code, that kind of stuff, have stable relationships, maintain some kind of employment, roof overhead. In other words, be functional in life. And people who are suffering from what we call mental illness may have some elements of spirituality that happen to them, but it's more incapacitating than a near-death experience, which is still pretty incapacitating. But
right,
yeah.
right, exactly. And you had mentioned something about it being more unusual, that you got what I had the same type of near-death experience. I call it the preview of coming attractions. Versus the life review, because many people do get the life review, but you were so young. It's not surprising to me that you got the preview, and I was 36 at the time. So again, there was, a lot of life to come up. Do you think perhaps, Kimberly, that we get the near-death experience we need? Do you think that's why they can just be so different? Yes, there's absolutely some commonalities.
But then they become tailored to what we're going to respond to. If I were dying and I were met by someone else's loved ones, well, so what? That'd be like that gallery of people, it mean nothing to me.
Mhm.
But if I'm having a near-death experience and I'm met by an oompa or, anyone I love,
Right.
that's going to be tailored to me, not in
Exactly.
general. A life review will be tailored to the person having the life review, not someone else. And on it goes. Children too, that's a subspecialty of mine, are children. And with kids, you need a lot of crayons. We could talk about no words, but kids like to draw. So I would pack crayons, and did for a year as part of a children's study. And their experiences, one 7-year-old did have a little life review, but otherwise, you're right, Wendy, not enough life to have a significant life review. And this kid's life review was mainly about sandwiches and toys. So it was cute.
Very, very age appropriate.
Yeah. But children make good witnesses because they haven't been exposed in literature or entertainment or documentaries or podcasts about this.
Right. And
They're
they
on
just
the Disney
don't have
Channel,
any,
which this is not. Yeah.
there's no subterfuge. They just are so
Yeah.
straight up, so open.
Yeah, especially when they start naming people, who have died. And one kid I wrote about, Corey, at age 9, he did die, but he was going in and out for the longest time. And when he finally, he called it Summerland. But when he finally got the medical attention is when he started, he would come back again. Poor child. Really had a lot of physical things wrong, obviously, but in his little body. But he began to tell those in attendance at the hospital who he saw in Summerland, and he was identifying children that had died in
Oh,
the hospital.
that hospital
How
team
would
would know.
Yeah, how would he know? So Corey is the child near-death experiencer I like holding up, because an amazing kid. And this whole thing with Summerland, and he drew it out. He came to the attention of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was a well-known person in the field of death and dying. If you're in the field of death and dying, you know who she is. And she was my mentor. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah, I get around. And so she came to Seattle to meet Corey and loved him and loved his little sister. And but amazing that he could go, come back and identify other children. No way he could know they had died. Some had died at home.
Mhm.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah. So
and
he's my-
he knew first names and last names even, do you know?
no, I can't remember.
Okay.
But I wasn't ever with him when he shared that information. I was like down the line.
Right.
His mom was, and she was part of my line. She became a friend. And no, I don't know. Mom would know.
That's
The
fine.
physician would know. And I know that I'm
Fine.
still in contact with the main physician. So, but I have to be honest, I'm not sure.
Right, right. So, but there's just been such beautiful moments where we can just hear you describing your belief system just opening and opening, because yes, you know, that logical training. And do you think perhaps it's because just like the fear kicks in of we don't want to be crazy, we don't want to, you know, not have credibility, etc. Do you think it's just fear that starts that? Oh my goodness, excuse me.
Oh,
And-
she's going out of body. Yay. Thank you for the demo, Wendy. I'm not sure if I understood the question, and she's not here. Oh, Wendy.
Do you think
I'm
it was
right
the fear, your fear of being ridiculed or discredited?
Yeah. Yeah. But when Seattle Ions was first founded, that was what brought people in. It was I'm crazy, or my husband thinks I'm crazy, or my children think I'm crazy, my pastor thinks I'm going to hell, my doctor wants to put me on drugs. I mean, we even had people come in who had been institutionalized for this, just for having a near-death experience. They were put into a psych hospital. That doesn't happen anymore. I'm happy. And I would love to say someday we don't even need a support group. It's so accepted that, and it's true in some other countries. Because of my husband's involvement with Medic One, a lot of visitors from around the globe have come into Seattle and then into our home, because my husband calls our house the International House of People, IHOP. Anyway, we had a doctor from a country I cannot pronounce, Myanmar. We know it as Burma for most of my life anyway. He couldn't believe there was a support group for this, because in Burma, Myanmar, this is no biggie. I mean, it's like, yeah.
Right.
And he was so shocked. He couldn't stop talking about it. His next stop was New York City. He even called me from there and said, now I really have to understand this. In America, yeah, people aren't.
Well, we're not
given a shake of,
comfortable
yeah,
with we're not
credibility.
comfortable with death and dying. We're not comfortable with grief. We're not
Yeah.
comfortable with
Yeah.
near-death experiences.
Yeah,
So
Western culture is not great on the subject of death and dying.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is fear-based. And that is just sad for me, because, you know, but I get it, of course. I mean, and then even looking at my dad, my heaven was his hell. You know, for anyone who's had a child, can you imagine hearing them pronounced dead? I mean, terrible. He never got over it, actually. I had to be careful about when I would ask questions, because he would begin to cry. It was traumatic. So, yeah, and then sometimes people say, oh, I wish I could have a near-death experience. I'm going, bite your tongue, baby. It requires the body taking a huge hit.
Right.
And that requires recovery, and some things aren't recoverable. So no. Just trust the Kim. It's all going to be okay.
Great. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Kim, could you tell us a little bit about, you have been such an amazing influencer behind the scenes on things like Netflix's Surviving Death. And I was so thrilled how that docuseries went immediately, pretty quickly up to #1, and the new film that's coming out. So what has your role been in those? Have you just like helped identify some of the people that would be good interviews after death, coming out later this month at the
Yeah.
limited theater engagement?
Yeah, big screen though, beginning on October 27th, a documentary called After Death that looks to be really good. So if I'm not in front of the camera, and sometimes like now I am, I'm often behind the camera, so to speak, because I know everybody. So even this morning, got an email from someone who wants to do a documentary, and could you help me? And it's like, sure. So, but sometimes it's challenging. Sometimes newscasts will want, we'd like a Native American female with one leg who, was in a teepee fire, and okay. But there are more and more people having near-death experiences, by the way, too, because resuscitation efforts have gotten better over the decades. So the numbers are increasing, information is increasing, and documentaries like the Netflix show, which I am in front of the camera, but before then I was a paid researcher. And then they decided I had more to say than, they wanted me to say in front of the camera. And they came to Seattle Ions. And I can't endorse the other subjects in the series because it's out of my field, but episode 1 is near-death experiences. So, yeah, my fingerprints are all over that. So, and it's fun. And I like to put people in front of the camera because actually everyone, near-death experience or not, everyone has a story. And you get to a certain age and we have good stories because we've done some living. So I just want to encourage people to share their stories. You're not crazy. You're not demented. You're alive again.
Right. And I loved how your aunt, it was just for her, it was just as simple as just taking you on her lap, even as a young adult, and just saying, what were her words? You've just had a spiritual.
Why, honey, you've had yourself a spiritual experience.
It just was that simple. And as you pointed out, in some cultures, it is just so much more a part of the culture.
Yeah.
And one other question, and then Greg, we should probably check if there's questions on the Facebook feed. You mentioned when you were home with the light, it was very clear to you that math and music connection. Could you speak more to that? Because you don't know this most likely, but Greg is a talented musician. So I just found that really interesting because, because of the parts of the brain, if you could talk about that a bit more.
Yes, with the understanding I am not in neurosciences.
Understand.
I'm a social worker. But that said, when I had a near-death experience, it was like my life was a jigsaw puzzle that was pretty complete on a table. And then along came the NDE, and all the pieces went up in the air, and they fell down into a different pattern. And why I chose to include that, I don't know. But sometimes I get prompting that I can hear whatever. Somehow what I just said, I'm interrupting myself again. What I just said, whatever I said, I'm not even sure I remember what I said, but it was really important for someone.
Okay.
Or who's going to.
Puzzle pieces are rearranged from the near-death experience. Interesting.
I get these hits every now and then.
Yeah.
That was fun. So
Cool.
what were we talking about? Boy, that's distracting.
Math and music.
When this happens, stuff like this happens when I'm driving, I have to pull over. It's ridiculous. But oh yes, math and music. Well, but when that puzzle piece landed, I thought, good grief, because I don't have skills in either. And it turns out, though, a lot of brain science going on. And it seems, my understanding, that it seems that until around age 10, the brain doesn't even know the difference between math and music. Music and math are the same. So the conventional.
That's fascinating to me.
Get your child or grandchild into music lessons before age 10, because math after that just becomes easier to understand. But isn't that interesting? And music
Perhaps the rhythm
astrology
to
is a
both.
lot of math anyway. Yeah, there's, I don't know. I think we're made perfectly, you know, to be like flesh computers on the earth.
Mhm.
I mean, we have these things called brains, and they're everything. And I wish mine worked even better, but that we can perceive anything at all would be our brains, whether it's spiritual or not, and whether it's math or not, or music or not. But yet, that I just think is interesting that that is how God chose to do our communication, and it was perfect. People usually say about a near-death experience and communication that it was telepathic. But not really for me. I felt like I was, getting it all, and actually speaking, even though it was math and music, to me it was like words. And I just think it's all fascinating. Just being here. Another near-death experiencer in Seattle has called what we are here now that we're meat puppets. But the communication, though, from whoever the puppet master is, would be our brains.
Mhm.
I mean, I have no problem when people say, oh, this is a thing about the brain. Well, duh, it's not about your big toe. It's, of course it's a brain, but that to me doesn't diminish the miracle of what we call a near-death experience or a spiritual transformative experience,
Right.
and people have amazing experiences anyway. I have a neighbor now deceased, but she began to talk about the nice people in the room, in her living room or the bedroom, whatever. And her son finally, came and knocked and said, what do you make of this? And I said, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think she's gonna die. She's an older woman, but in perfect health, lived independently in her own home, but she fell and broke her arm and went to a nearby facility to recover after her surgery and was doing great. And the day of her discharge, son went to pick her up, and she was tired because she had just had lunch. The staff said, it's fine. Let her nap and we'll do the paperwork and all that. She never awakened. She did die. But it brought the family such comfort that mom or grandma were with the nice people in the room. That man, who also was a neighbor and my husband's best friend in the neighborhood, died 2.5 months ago himself of cancer. And this came up with his family after the services, that one of his daughters said, the nice people in the room, probably with my grandma, came to get dad. That story stayed with the family.
No.
Absolutely.
And I wasn't going to go in and say, oh, lady, you're crazy. I mean, she was seeing people in the room. I mean, and it becomes our job to support that perspective, not discount it.
Right. Absolutely. Well, we just have to honor people's experience, their direct experience, and just open our hearts to that. And I loved how one of the first things you said is you shared your NDE, Kim, was going home and getting the reminder that we're made of nothing but love, and just being able to feel that. So I don't see any questions in the
super glue, as far as I'm concerned.
There we go, the super glue. So Greg, probably we're ready to move on then, because I'm not seeing any other questions in the group.
Yes.
And
So
that's good then.
yes. So I am so thrilled that I get the opportunity to go to Kim's amazing group and share my near-death experience. And it's going to be this coming Saturday, October 14th. So those of you who are in the Seattle area or would like to come on to the Seattle area, October 14th, 1:30 p.m.
Let's give a website.
I did. It's at the very bottom,
perfect.
which
Then
is
you can find out
Seattle
where and when, all that.
IANDS.org.
We got the Wendy.
Yeah, so it's just, and I, like Kim, was the preview of coming attractions, and I also did not know what to do with this profound shift in my belief system. It took about 20 years to really unpack it all, because the irony of living in Seattle, but I didn't know about Seattle IAN, so evidently I was meant to unpack it on my own, and now many years later get to get to share the experience. So
Yeah.
looking forward to that, because getting to have that connection with the divine, getting to have that connection with being able to hear angels and ascended masters and hear God. And again, whatever your belief system is, but just being able to connect like that, because it may be different for you. As Kim said, don't get hung up on the word God or angels. It just is whatever, wherever you're meant to connect, and being able to uplift your life with it, so you can more feel that peace and that love and that joy. Maybe God is a hippie, and we should just end with that. I liked that summary.
Very cool.
So thank you. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Kimberly, for being here. Just so appreciate your story. Your book is beautifully well written. I really, really enjoyed it and highly recommend it. So people should check that out on Amazon. And please join Greg and I again on November 13th for the next Waking Up Spiritually podcast. Join us in our Facebook group, which is Waking Up Spiritually. And you can also see the link here to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We so appreciate you rating and reviewing us on Apple iTunes or whatever your favorite app is. Visit Greg at his website, Gregg, Kirk, KIRK.com, and check out Greg's wonderful book, The Gratitude Curve, and all the events and things that he has going on. And please visit me at my website, which is wendyrosewilliams.com. And it is my honor to offer complimentary 1-hour sessions on an ongoing basis as a group Zoom call, where we do an energy healing, clearing and blessing for everyone, because who doesn't need that? And then I walk you through some resources I have available to share with you, as well as what healing sessions with me are like. And then we get into a Q&A, because that's always my favorite, to just get to the questions and answers like today. So thank you so much for being here. Any additional parting words, either Greg or Kimberly?
Leave it up to Kimberly.
All right. I do have parting words, and that's to always remember, even when things appear to be insurmountable, horrible, painful, whatever life throws at us, because all those things will be thrown at us, just to remember that which we call God is love. And we are loved. And if I may add a piece of advice on top of that, to be nice to everybody. And do the best we can, and we're done. We're good. The rest
There we go.
Yep.
Really, but it doesn't matter. Just know that we're loved. Be nice. Keep your chin up.
There we go.
And
Thank you
love.
so much.
All righty.
Thank you for being our guest, Kim. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, I like the best.
Best guest.
My favorite.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Bye-bye.